Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where we work to untangle the messy knots of the health and fitness industry as if your children's lives depended on it. Because they do. This is where we decide to make our bodies stand for something bigger than ourselves. This is where we find practical wisdom to live by, one powerful conversation at a time. May the words spoken here inspire you to keep moving forward no matter where you are. Who knows who you could be if you could become 1% better every single day.
We can do the show thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information how you can become part of the inner circle, go to findingdadbod.com/inner circle.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. Today's show is a special show because I'm sharing with you what I've learned in the last 3 weeks since writing the article, Beating COVID-19, the long-term plan that nobody's talking about. If you missed that article, the link's in the show notes below, and I won't do a lot of recapping that here, except to say that we've learned a lot in the last 3 weeks, especially here in the US, and I believe it's important that each of us understands what our individual health and fitness means to doing well by our families and our communities in the face of this pandemic and perhaps future issues that crop up like this. Now, normally when I record an episode, I usually turn on the microphone, I have an outline in front of me, and thanks to my awesome editor, it's almost like creating a spoken essay in real time. She does the hard work of chopping out the silences and chopping out some of the ums and ahs to make things sound a little smoother and cleaner. But I did things differently with this particular episode, partially because I wanted there to be a video component, and you can find that on YouTube if you'd like to see me speak in person, but also because it seems like everybody has something to say about coronavirus or COVID-19 right now, and I wanted you to see and hear my honest thoughts in real time, with very little polishing. So that's what you're about to listen to. I hope you find it helpful. I hope you find it valuable. And as you'll note, this strategy of raising the dotted line and lowering the incidence of pre-existing conditions requires that we all make an effort individually to take responsibility for our own exercise, our own nutrition, and our own habits that are going to improve our ability to fight this virus and prevent fatal infections. That said, I hope you'll share it with the people in your life that you want to take good care of, and who perhaps have been living in some sort of fear or felt immobilized by all the things outside of them that they can't control. I have no housekeeping bits for you today. I just want you to know that Defining Dad Bod is here for you, to support you in your efforts to better yourself, your families, and your communities through your own health and fitness journey. You can get free support at definingdadbod.com/inner circle and join our community that's listener supported and is made up of amazing people who will help support you and encourage you and ask you to do the same for them. But if you need a more personalized approach and you need some professional support on your own health and fitness journey, you can check out our offerings at definingdadbod.com/shop. We've added a low-cost meal planning tool and 1 week of coaching at a discounted rate to help you springboard in this health and fitness journey in a positive, powerful, and sustainable way. Again, free resources at definingdadbod.com/inner circle and our paid services at definingdadbod.com/shop. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the long-term plan for beating COVID-19 that nobody's talking about. What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. Today's show is a very special show. I'm going to be talking, just like almost everybody else in the entire world right now, about coronavirus. However, this is not the first time I've talked about coronavirus. This is a follow-up on a conversation, an article that I wrote on March 23rd, and I put it out in the world, and it's called Beating Coronavirus, the long-term plan that nobody's talking about. Now, it's a very long article, and these days, if you have more than 2 or 3 paragraphs in an article, most people will scroll through it for a second and then go, I don't know if I'm going to spend time on that. And I apologize in the sense that I just can't say that that many important things in an extremely short amount of words. And so I made sure there were great citations, and I laid out the argument as intelligently as I know how. However, today I want to follow up on that because I've gotten smarter since then. And as a world, and specifically in the US as a nation, we've accumulated a lot more data in the last several weeks. And so I can expound on that argument and expound on that conversation just a little further. Now, I need to get something out of the way first, and that is, why should I, that is you, why should I listen to a personal trainer's opinion about coronavirus? I'm not a medical expert. In fact, here on Defining Dad Bod, I am very proactive about making sure that you know when I'm speaking non-medically, when I say, hey, this is not a medical recommendation. Things with regard to nutrition and exercise can very easily cross into medical boundaries when we're talking about things like pre-existing conditions and whatnot. And that's important, and I think it's important for me to address that here before I go on telling you what I'm about to tell you. So first, why should you listen to a personal trainer about coronavirus? I think if you're like me at all, you're probably sick of hearing this. You're probably just sick of hearing about coronavirus, COVID-19, the Rona, as the cute little 6-year-old up the street calls this whole thing right now in our neighborhood. You're probably sick of hearing about it. And so why should you listen to what I have to say at all? If you haven't heard it already, then this is something that you're not hearing from people, okay? What I'm about to tell you is something you're not hearing from people. And I say if you haven't heard it already, because unless you've actually read the article that I wrote or have listened to maybe 3 of the other voices in the media right now speaking about coronavirus or pandemics with a long-term health and fitness point of view, then you haven't heard this. You haven't heard what it is that we can do as a population, you in your home right now, what you can do as a population to fortify yourself, fortify your family, fortify your community against things that might be coming up in the future. And they are coming up in the future, by the way. On March 23rd, when I wrote the article that I wrote and published it, and I'll put the link in the description below if you didn't get a chance to read the original piece, but on March 23rd, there was already whispers within the scientific community of a resurgence of the viral infection following the warm summer months. And that might be on account of a number of things. We're learning that there are people who've been infected with the coronavirus who might show symptoms again a couple months after being declared recovered, quote unquote. So who knows? It could be like the flu. It could be something that comes back regularly and that you have to deal with, once every few years or once a year. It could also be that the heat and humidity of summer months here in North America, the Northern Hemisphere, that we're going to get a break from the proliferation of the virus, and then it's going to come back with a vengeance in the fall and the winter, and that could mean further measures like social distancing and whatnot that we have to deal with again, and hopefully more intelligently next time. The point is, we're not done with this thing. It doesn't magically go away. And a few weeks following this article, here at the time of this recording, this is middle of April, then what we're looking at is actually a Harvard study that just came out. This came out yesterday, and I'll post the link in the show notes below, that we could be dealing with this as far into the future as 2022. Dealing with this in the sense that trying to, quote, flatten the curve so that our medical capacity is not overwhelmed, and so that doctors don't have to make a choice between saving your grandma or your neighbor's aunt or whatever it is when they come in for emergency care resulting from complications of COVID-19. Now, all that to say, we will be dealing with this in the future. It's not magically going to go away. And those who would herald a vaccine as the ultimate and direct and happy end to this whole thing is that's still pretty far in the future as well, regardless of whether or not you agree with vaccinations or mandatory vaccinations. That's still something that's past at least next fall and maybe even next spring, right? So all that being said, in the article, Beating Coronavirus for the Long Term, the plan that you haven't heard of or that you're not hearing about, my goal in this article is, one, to proactively think through what the future looks like for us in the sense that that this isn't going away. It's something that we're likely going to have to deal with. Many experts, smarter than me, aren't saying if you get the virus, it's when you get the virus. And the question is whether or not that's going to be a fatal infection for you or a fatal infection that you could spread to other people who are at risk in your surrounding area. And so we're going to deal with that. That's nobody's questioning that. We're going to deal with that in the future. Now, you might be dealing with things that are like right in your face right now. So thinking 6 months in advance or 2 years in advance might be asking a lot of you right now, and that's fair enough. And so today, one of the things that I want to make sure that you know is that the reason you should listen to what I have to say to you today is because there are actions that you can take right now. There are actions you can take today, right after hearing me. In fact, while you're hearing me, you could be taking those actions right now so that 6 months in advance, 2 years in advance, the future is brighter for everybody, including you, your family, and your community. And so that's one of the reasons you should hear me out here too. You know what? I have heard a lot of things about political speculations and financial speculations, and then I've also heard of epidemiologists talking through, the numbers and statistics and all that stuff. What I haven't heard much of is people empowering people. What I haven't heard much of is telling you, as an individual, what you and your family can actually be doing to make things better. There are a lot of things around us right now that we can't control. We can't control the price of stocks in the stock market. We can't control whether or not your stimulus check shows up or what the stipulations around that actually look like for you. We can't control a lot of the moving parts of these things as individuals. Now, at a local and federal level from a government perspective, and then businesses and whatnot, there are a lot of moving parts there that perhaps you play a part in. And if you do, thank you. Keep up the good work, and I hope you make wise and awesome decisions. But as individuals, I don't hear a lot of people talking about what we can do as individuals outside of washing our hands and wearing a mask and trying not to go out too much, right? So today I want to talk to you about what you can do about coronavirus and what you can do to fortify yourself, to fortify your family, to fortify your community, so that we end up in a better spot than what we walked into here, and so that we can be prepared for the future. Because I don't hear a lot of people talking about the future. I hear a lot of people talking about the next week or the next month or maybe the fall, right? That's about as far as it goes. But I want to talk to you about the future, the long-term win here. So in order to hear me out and in order to understand why what I'm saying is important to you, you have to understand how coronavirus works. And honestly, this is something we're just starting to learn. Okay, we're just starting to get the research and the knowledge around being able to discuss this intelligently. Because when you first heard about coronavirus, I'm sure you heard that it was a lung infection. And that's actually what most coronaviruses are. They usually start in the throat and then they move down to the lungs and they cause complications in the lungs. And in fact, many people who have been declared deceased because of a coronavirus infection or COVID-19 specifically have died of respiratory failure. However, we're learning more about how this works, and one of the things that was fascinating to me, again, I will post the link to this article in the show notes, and it's not like some opinion piece. This is a scientific journal article about how coronavirus is actually proliferating itself in the body. One of the things we're learning is that it attacks your ability as a human being to build hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a really important protein that makes up specifically red blood cells, or at least is incorporated into red blood cells, that allows red blood cells to take oxygen from the air you breathe in and then to transport it throughout the body to the cells that need the oxygen so that they can function right. Why is that a big deal? Why is it a big deal for me to have a problem creating hemoglobin in my body? Well, it turns out that there are many tissues in your body that if you deprive them of oxygen, then that affects all of your organ systems. It affects your immune system. It affects your ability to detoxify yourself. It basically affects your ability to continue living, right? So without hemoglobin, you are not going to live a very long and prosperous life. And so one of the ways that coronavirus is kicking our butt here is it congregates. It starts, in the lungs, right? But it's it starts in the throat, moves to the lungs, and then in fatal infections, what happens is it destroys enough hemoglobin that it ruins the kidney and the liver's ability. The kidney, which is important, the kidneys are important for detoxifying the bloodstream, for filtering out all the stuff that your body can't, your body's building up over time. They're the byproducts of metabolism, but it can't function with a lot of those in your bloodstream. That's why people who have kidney failure need to go on dialysis or they will die, right? Okay, so destruction of hemoglobin messes with the function of the kidneys. Similarly, destruction of hemoglobin messes with the functions of the liver, and the liver is responsible for almost, I don't know what, I'm going to make up a percentage, so I'm just not going to. A very, very large amount of the metabolic processes in your body occur in the liver. Detoxifying and life-sustaining processes happen in the liver. And so when you reduce the oxygen deliverability of the body to the kidneys and the liver, then you create the perfect storm for a body to discontinue, well, living. So that's what coronavirus is doing. Coronavirus, as far as we understand it so far, is moving to the lungs in fatal infections. It's moving to the lungs. It's destroying the capacity to move oxygen by way of hemoglobin. It's destroying the capacity of oxygen deliverability to the kidneys and the liver. And so that's how it's functioning. So respiratory failure is the number one reason people die, and then the number two reason is septic shock. Septic shock means a buildup of toxins in the system such that your organs begin to fail. Your heart can't continue functioning, your liver can't continue functioning, your digestive system can't continue functioning, your brain can't continue functioning. When there's a buildup of toxic sludge, if you want to think of it that way, it's just really chemical compounds that your body creates through metabolic processes. Your immune system can't fight the infection, all of those things, when you end up with way more of those byproducts in your bloodstream than you can handle. So that's what's happening. Why am I telling you all this? Well, it's important to understand why coronavirus is fatal to a certain subset of the population, right? Now, at first, when we looked at the data coming out in January and February, we were seeing that coronavirus seemed to, strangely, didn't target young people, didn't target middle-aged people. It was targeting older people. Like the fatalities with regard to coronavirus because of COVID-19, leading to COVID-19 disease, was the older population over 60. And then new data was coming out shortly thereafter that it wasn't just people over 60. It wasn't like if you're over 60, you're screwed. It's if you had pre-existing conditions, and there was a subset, a list of pre-existing conditions that seemed to make you more susceptible to a fatal infection by coronavirus. And so what is that subset? Well, there's quite a few on this list, but the top three are obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. It's not just being over 60. It turns out, regardless of your age, if you fall into the category of obese, diabetic, or cardiovascular disease, then you are at a much higher risk of a fatal infection from coronavirus than the rest of the population. In fact, if you're not on that list of pre-existing conditions, there are a few others, things like being immunocompromised, like if you've been treated with chemotherapy, for instance, or you're on a drug that suppresses your immune system, you have an increased risk of fatal infection. But it's less than half, by the way. Being immunocompromised is less than half as deadly than having type 2 diabetes with regard to a coronavirus infection. That's a big deal. So why is that? Why is that the case? Well, it turns out that if you are obese, if you have cardiovascular disease, if you have diabetes, it's very likely that you have problems with oxygen deliverability already. You already have a problem getting oxygen from the air you breathe to your blood cells and then to the rest of the cells in your body. You already have a problem with oxygen deliverability. Maybe you don't have as many red blood cells as other people who don't have those comorbid pre-existing conditions, right? Maybe you don't have enough red blood cells. Maybe your red blood cells are just not very efficient. Maybe you have an iron deficiency. Maybe you have a permeability problem, meaning that your actual lungs don't transfer oxygen to your bloodstream very well. Maybe your heart isn't as strong as it could be. There's a number of things that kind of wrap around oxygen deliverability. It's a very important thing. You can go without food for, around 30 to 40 days. You can go without water for maybe 3, maybe 5 days, but you can go without oxygen for the next 7 minutes, maybe, and then you die, right? So hold your breath, see how long that lasts, right? Oxygen, extremely important. And so what you're seeing with coronavirus is the attack of the oxygen deliverability system. And for people who are already in a rough spot with regard to their oxygen deliverability, they're at major risk. They're at major risk for a fatal infection. Because if you can't get oxygen to these important organs, then these important organs are going to shut your whole body down, and then you're not going to make it, whether it's respiratory failure or septic shock. Those things are going to take you down. And so I'm talking about this as a personal trainer who sees a list of pre-existing conditions that in many cases, and this is according to the CDC, 20 to 40%, and I know that's a very wide range, but this is what the CDC says. Okay, I'm falling back on the CDC here since this is technically medical information and I'm not qualified to just make up numbers here. So 20 to 40%, according to the CDC, of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease are preventable. That's a big deal. Before I get into the preventability of pre-existing conditions, though, when you extend out the timeline for the rate of infection for coronavirus, we social distance and we flatten the curve, right? And then that way our medical capacity is not overwhelmed. It's not that social distancing will keep you from getting the virus. At some point, most experts are saying at some point everybody's going to get infected with this thing. It's like trying to avoid the flu. Like, I'm 31 years old. Having the flu is not something that you just like, oh, when you're 7, just don't get the flu. Try not to get the flu. Maybe you won't get the flu ever in your life. You're going to get the flu. It's the problem is the problem isn't getting the flu. It's if everybody gets the flu at the same time and needs life supporting systems to stay alive, then we're all in a lot of trouble, right? And the same thing goes with this COVID-19 thing. So let's say we social distance and we flatten the curve. Great. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get the virus. It doesn't mean that everybody's not going to eventually be infected by this thing. Whether or not we make it to there being a vaccine available or not, it's that we don't want to overwhelm our medical capacity with fatal infections of coronavirus such that we have to make some moral decisions about who gets care and who doesn't. That's what we're really afraid of. That's the thing that's scariest is having to make moral decisions about medical help in fatal infections. And so, all that to say, we have an opportunity here. While we're buying time, flattening the curve, we have an opportunity as a society, as a community, as a governing bodies to elevate our medical capacity to our worst case scenarios. We have the opportunity, and I'm not going to get into that here. I talk about it in the article that I wrote. I'm not super qualified to talk about how we can get there, but I threw some ideas down. We'll see what sticks. And I've submitted this to New York Times, Washington Post. I don't know if they're going to pick up on it, but I'm hoping that somebody has these conversations in a high enough place where we can actually make intelligent decisions about, I call it raising the dotted line. That's the dotted line of our medical capacity that we're concerned about going over top of. But then there's the top part. Let's say, worst case scenario, everybody gets infected who can possibly get infected, right? There's that little peak group above the dotted line that we're concerned with not having the medical capacity to care for. And I think that's a real concern. I think that's really important. And that's where the pre-existing conditions piece comes in. And if you don't have pre-existing conditions, it's on you not to take up medical beds that could otherwise be hospital beds, ICU beds, that could otherwise be used for people who couldn't have prevented this in the first place. What am I saying? I'm saying that if you are in excellent physical condition, if you've taken good care of your body, you have great oxygen deliverability, you have a powerful immune system, you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you're exercising regularly, you put all those things together, then you lower your risk. It doesn't make you immune, but you significantly lower your risk of contracting a fatal infection. And that's across the board, actually. It's not just coronavirus or COVID-19. That's the same could be said about the flu. The same thing could be said about, viral pneumonia. The same thing could be said about just about any infection out there. And that's something that makes this coronavirus pandemic very different from things like smallpox or Ebola. It doesn't matter how fit you are. If you get Ebola, there's a very good chance you're done. Same thing goes for smallpox. Once upon a time, like I don't care if you could run a marathon. I don't care if you could do 500 burpees in 2 minutes. I don't know anybody who can do 500 burpees in 2 minutes. But anyway, I don't care how fit you are, how good your oxygen deliverability system is. You get smallpox, you're probably done. Brutal fatality rate. Coronavirus, on the other hand, that's not the case. Your level of fitness, your ability to deliver oxygen, your ability to mount a good immune response, right? Those things in your body that are inherent within a healthy and disciplined lifestyle, those are actually very buffering to a fatal infection. Those are very buffering to a fatal infection. And so if you have pre-existing conditions, I'll talk to you in a second, but if you're healthy, otherwise, you're not on the list of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, you have a responsibility, as I see it right now, you have a responsibility to take amazing care of your own health, the things you can control right now. You need to exercise regularly. You need to eat well. You need to get enough sleep. Why? We need to keep your oxygen deliverability up. We need to keep your blood volume strong, a good count of red blood cells, and your immune system strong. We need all those things. Why? So you don't take up an ICU bed that somebody else could be using if they contracted a fatal infection. I'm 31 years old. If I'm sitting on my couch eating Netflix, eating potato chips while watching Netflix throughout this entire quarantine, shelter in place, depending on what state you live in right now, there's a different order, right? If that's what let's say the worst case scenario happens and everybody gets this thing all at once. I feel responsible, and I think you should too if you're in this position. I feel responsible if I'm taking up a ventilator and a hospital bed and whatever drugs it is that they're treating this thing with. I'm taking all that up because my body just couldn't handle it. And it's not because my body couldn't handle it because I have some pre-existing condition or whatever that I had no control over. It's that my body couldn't handle it because I didn't take care of myself. That's a big deal. And that's one of the things that I argue in this article, is that if we're going to make a significant impact on our ability as a population to handle this thing well, to keep our economy running, to stay at work, to not exceed our medical capacity, then those of us who are otherwise healthy have a responsibility to eat well, to exercise, to get enough sleep, to get outside and get some vitamin D, man, and to keep our immune system strong, to get our oxygen deliverability as high as possible. That's your VO2 through cardiovascular training and resistance training, and to be in a position to fight the infection well. Let's face it, the numbers show us, most of us, without even trying, most of us have a very significantly low fatality rate with regard to this disease. That's powerful. That's powerful, and I argue that regardless of what pandemic we face, because we probably will face more pandemics, coronavirus notwithstanding, we will probably face more pandemics as a population. It's something we've faced for as long as we know our evolutionary history to be. We've faced stuff like this. This is very natural. The question is, are we going to be ready for it? And I think one of the things we're having our eyes open to right now is a healthy and fit population is going to be much better suited to fight this thing off, period. So all that to say, that's really a non-medical perspective. Now, to pre-existing conditions, let's say you're in the category of people who, for whatever reason, have a much higher fatality rate with regard to infections for coronavirus. Well, I hope that other healthy people are leaving the hospital beds for you. That's one thing. But two, I've got to ask you to ask yourself, according to the CDC, 20 to 40% of these pre-existing conditions are preventable, which means you didn't just, get the bad lottery with regard to genetics. It doesn't mean that you... I don't know, that you were sitting around one day and came down with a disease and you're like, dang, I've got this disease and I can't do anything about it. That's not where 24 to 40% of people with these pre-existing conditions are sitting. They can be at least managed, if not completely prevented, by nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle. Those are behavioral things, right? And this is powerful and important. And look, I'm not on my high personal training horse looking down on you saying you need to get in shape. This is all about willpower. Lose some weight. Dang it. I'm not saying that. I have a pre-existing condition called Ehlers-Danlos. Ehlers-Danlos is a genetic disorder. I didn't do anything to contract this thing. It's something that was passed on to me in my DNA, all right? That it makes my joints, my tendons and ligaments really gummy and loose, so I get injured very easily. And I mean, stupid things like making my bed, all right? I can jump on a box yay high. I can, leap my toddler in a single bound, but I can't make my bed without, dislocating my ankle. It's a pain in the butt. Anyway, all that to say, I am still committed to making the best of it for me. I'm still committed to exercising in a way that's good for my lungs, my heart, my bloodstream. I'm still committed to keeping my muscles as strong as possible so that they can make up for the tendons and ligaments, right? I'm not perfect. I'm not going to be an Olympic athlete. I'm not going to break any world records for deadlift, but I'm making the most of it. I'm making the most of it. And that's what I would call you to do. If you are in the category of pre-existing conditions, if you're currently being treated for cardiovascular disease, if you're currently being treated for diabetes, if you're currently obese, look, you are at a higher risk of fatal infection. If you haven't read the numbers and nobody's told you, I'm telling you, you're at a higher risk of fatal infection. But that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do to prepare your body well for that. And it's not just coronavirus, it's just about everything. Right? And who knows, maybe you could reverse obesity for yourself. Maybe you could reverse cardiovascular disease. But even if you can't, I can't reverse Ehlers-Danlos. Nothing I do is going to change the fact that my body sucks at synthesizing collagen. Maybe someday stem cell research will happen upon some virus I can inject myself with, and then I'll be better. But that's not the case right now. And I'm looking into the future, 30, 40, 50 years, and I'm saying, man, I'm going to do the best I can with these crummy joints I have, so that I can keep up with my kids and, eventually my grandkids, and I don't have to live in more pain than necessary and blah, 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 right? It's a lifelong discipline for me. The same goes for you. If you have pre-existing conditions, there are things you can do. There are things you can do to improve your ability to fight this infection. Because it's very likely, and it's not me speaking here. There are experts who know this stuff better than I do. It's very likely you're going to come down with this, period. It's very likely you're going to come down with this. And you're likely going to come down with this before the vaccinations are available. You're likely going to come down with this probably about the same time everybody else starts to come down with it. When people can't be social distancing anymore, or maybe we don't give up on that, but whatever conduit it is that you end up with this thing, it's very likely you're going to get it. So how can you prepare yourself to fight this thing well? How can you prepare yourself to fight this thing well? So the good news is there's things you can do about that. There's things you can do about oxygen deliverability. There are things you can do to improve your immune system, and it's not just a short-term hokey boost. It's improving your immune system for the long haul. That's a big deal. There are things you can do about that. And I outline those pretty significantly in the article I wrote. I also, this is not a big sales pitch for personal training. I mean, if you need support for the support of a coach, an individual professional support, we do that at Defining Dad Bod. You can reach out to me. My contact's in the show notes below. But I posted just a ridiculous litany of free resources to help you eat well, to help you exercise regularly, and to change some lifestyle habits that will make a difference. This is not a 8-week or 12-week program to six-pack abs. This is, how do I, whether you're healthy or have pre-existing conditions or not, how do I improve my ability to deliver oxygen to the cells as they need to, increase my blood volume? How do I do that? How do I eat in a way that boosts my immune system and gives my body the best fighting chance to deal with an infection? And I even go so far as to say in this article that your efforts, your habits, your measures as a person will be a ripple effect in your home, in your community, and even in your workplace. And that if each of us takes it upon ourselves to give ourselves the best fighting chance with those habits, and we create that ethos for ourselves, that will extend to other people. that will extend to other people. If they see you exercising, if they see you taking a multivitamin, if they see you choosing, I don't know, salmon over Big Macs, whatever it is. I talk about these more specifically in the article, and I'm not as well spoken on the camera here as I am, or at least I hope I am, well written. So you're welcome to read that. But when you make those changes for yourself, other people catch on. Other people catch on. In fact, as contagious as this virus is, healthy habits are also contagious. Healthy habits are also contagious. And so just some simple things. Just some simple things. If you're not doing them right now, here's some recommendations, okay? And these are backed by science. This is really important. 3 times a week, 30 minutes of resistance training. 3 times a week, 30 minutes of resistance training. That improves your immune system. That improves your mental well-being. In fact, a lot of the things that people are concerned about in this social distancing are deaths related to depression and anxiety. Crazy, huh? The virus doesn't get you. Your mind won't stand for this for long, right? At least 30 minutes, 3 times a week of resistance. Do it. I've trained people with rheumatoid arthritis so bad that they can't grip weights. They can still do resistance training. It takes some creativity, but they can still do it. You don't have gym equipment at home. Your body versus gravity is a fantastic piece of gym equipment. Negative 9.8 meters per second squared. Acceleration pulling you down to the ground right now. You can get very creative with your ability to withstand gravity with your own body and musculature. And if you're blessed enough to have a garage gym available or some weights and equipment available, get that done at least 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And then similarly with cardiovascular exercise, a lot of the weight training people on my side of the fence with regard to personal training are, oh man, weight training, so important. Look, you want to improve your blood volume and oxygen deliverability? You can't get around it. You need to do cardio. Period. 3 times a week, at least 30 minutes. Now, some people would say, hey, Alex, I read that exercising can lower your immune system and therefore reduce your ability to fight infection. And that's true, actually. Certain types of exercise can lower your immune function. So here, general rule of thumb, if you haven't been exercising and you start now, start slow, start with your base level, because there's no reason for you to be ridiculously sore for the next week and ask your body to pull resources from immune system in order to deal with adaptations and recovery from exercise. So keep your intensities moderate to low. I say on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being this is the easiest thing I've ever done, and 10 being I'm gonna die if I keep doing this. We shouldn't really exercise right now above a 6 or 7. Okay. Now, if you've been exercising regularly, you have a really good tolerance for exercise, doing some short bouts of high intensity training wouldn't be that big of a deal for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. If you're going to get on the, I'm a 10, I'm going to die if I keep doing this. You do that for a little bit. It's not going to be that big of a deal. And then also note that the immune suppression of exercise is very short-lived. 4 to 6 hours after you exercise intensely, 4 to 6 hours after you exercise intensely is your most immunocompromised time. So if you're that concerned about it, if you're that concerned about lowering your immune system in the short term because of exercise, then don't go somewhere where you might catch an infection right after you do an intense exercise bout, right? So, you don't work out and then go to the grocery store, with your mask off and your gloves off, hugging everybody, like if that's what you're concerned about. But even then, the average person doesn't need to exercise that intensely to see significant benefits with regard to oxygen deliverability and immune system improvements. So 3 times a week, 30 minutes resistance training, 3 times a week, 30 minutes cardiovascular training. You can do more than that if you're so inclined, but that's the table stakes. The average person is not doing those things. And so, well, I'm telling you. And then from a nutrition perspective, some things that you can do to bolster your immune system. From a nutrition perspective, if you can avoid ultra-processed foods altogether, that makes a huge impact. It's not just like, oh, there's a lot of calories in ultra-processed food, and so that might make you larger and therefore in the obese category, and that's a pre-existing condition. I'm not talking about that. Most ultra-processed foods are very, very nutrient poor, right? So like your Twinkies, your Cheez-Its, like all the snacky foods, like you go to the grocery store right now. Most of the snack food aisles are wiped clean. Why? They're non-perishable, I guess. and people are stuck at home. So they're like, oh, comfort food, that's great. Your ultra-processed foods are very nutrient poor, so that's not helping your immune system at all. And then many of them, the core ingredients, things like soybeans, corn, wheat, those are great conduits for glyphosate and atrazine. Glyphosate and atrazine are both destroying microbiomes for people on a regular basis. And so what that means for you is that if you want to improve your immune system, you got to cut out the ultra-processed crap. You got to cut it out. Not all processing is bad. Like, I love kefir. Kefir, in fact, I was going to talk about helping your microbiome. Kefir is a great fermented dairy product, and it's processed to a certain extent to be able to bottle in a way that isn't going to go bad in your fridge in the next week, right? So that's great. But the Ben and Jerry's, same core ingredient, same dairy, right? But one's ultra processed and one's not so hardcore processed. So think about it from a nutrient perspective. We want to increase our nutrients, and we want to decrease our susceptibility to things that are empty calorie conduits for unneeded toxins. That would be really helpful for your immune system. Also, an emphasis on getting enough vitamin D. Look, if you've got skin problems and you don't want to be out in the sun, fine. Supplement with it. It's about the cheapest vitamin on the freaking market, right? You can get 1,500 IU, 2,000 IU, 3,000 IU. You can get that very inexpensively. And that has been shown to be antimicrobial, antiviral, and vitamin D is the building block for your immune system all around. And so getting enough vitamin D, whether you can get in the sun or you're going to be supplementing it, that's a huge nutritional advantage to you. And then the inflammatory markers with regard to your immune system, you're going to need enough omega-3s in your life. Now, some people like to supplement with fish oil and stuff, and I've recommended that in some cases for most people. But for a lot of people, I've just recommended, look, if you can just eat omega-3s, that'd be really powerful for you. Your cage-free eggs, you can see many of those are actually omega-3 fortified. That doesn't mean they've added omega-3s to the egg itself. It means that the omega-3s in the chicken feed is pretty high, and therefore the eggs are higher in omega-3. But your fish too. Gosh, man, sardines, like they last like 2 years, man. For the zombie apocalypse, I just need a cellar full of sardines and crackers and I'll be just fine. Sardines have an extremely high omega-3 count. And you might say, oh, tuna has high omega-3 too, but tuna's pretty high in the food chain, and so it concentrates a lot of mercury up the pool. So if you're going to be eating something with omega-3s in it every day, I would say if you can develop a taste for sardines or develop a taste for canned wild salmon, those would be much better sources of your omega-3s. And then again, in the seafood aisle, you look at the freezer area or even the canned seafood aisle, mussels, clams, and oysters all have a significant amount of immune boosting, say that 10 times fast, immune boosting nutrients like manganese, magnesium, vitamin A, vitamin K. There's a very large amount of vitamins and minerals in bivalves. And so I know not everybody has a taste for that, but I think if you add a little seasoning to it, you can develop a taste for just about anything. And so at this point in time, those things are really powerful too. And things like your carrots. Carrots are a great source of vitamin A, relatively high fiber count in comparison to the carbohydrate, so it's not going to mess with your blood sugar very much. And ginger, I'm a huge fan of ginger. Not only does it seem to help testosterone in men, which is great, but doing a ginger tea or adding some ginger root to your seasonings when you make your food and whatnot, since we're all cooking at home right now, the flavonoids in ginger actually boost your immune system significantly as well. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. There's much better places and resources to talk about food items you can eat to boost your immune system, but I hope that I'm giving you some ideas around how you might shift things that you're doing in your home, things that you're doing in your family, and maybe these healthy habits will proliferate to your community. Because here's the deal, guys. Look, we're not going to be done with coronavirus in 2 weeks. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care like when they open everything up in May, if they open it up in May or June or maybe August when school gets to open back up for the kids. We're not done with this thing. Never in the history of ever has a virus just disappeared on its own. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, especially with something that's reached pandemic status. It doesn't happen. And so from a large global perspective, we obviously, I hope, have the call and the time to improve our necessary medical capacity. That's something that people in higher positions than I can be working on, and I hope they get the message. But what you and I can be doing right now is making an investment in our own personal health and fitness. Just a little bit better. I'm not asking you to become a marathoner overnight. I'm not asking you to, start powerlifting competitions or train for a Tough Mudder, although all of those are very cool things. I'm asking you to bring your level of health and fitness at least up to the level of the best you could be to fight an infection. That's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to make the most of the body you got, to make the most of your oxygen deliverability and your immune system. And those are things you can do. Those are things you can do regularly. You can practice cardiovascular exercise. You can get better at resistance training. You can eat better. You can get enough sleep. I promise you, you can get more nutrients in your body than you are right now. And I'm telling you that it's never been more important. It's never been more important for us from a health and fitness perspective to invest in ourselves. In fact, in the article, I make the argument that imagine that our entire globe right now is on the stage of The Biggest Loser. I hate that show, actually. And I hate the premise of super restrictive caloric diets and high intensity exercise. But something's true about the idea of making the most progress we can over the next few months. And it's not so you can look good at the poolside, and it's not so you get great pictures at your wedding, although I hope those things are fun byproducts of you investing well in your health and fitness. But right now, if you take the time to eat better, if you take the time to exercise, if you engage your kids and your friends and your family in this ethos, then you'll get stronger. You'll be able to fight infections. Hopefully some of you can even reduce your incidence of pre-existing conditions, or if you have them, at least get strong enough that infections aren't fatal to you. And if we do that, then, well, you get the virus, you don't die, and then we can be done with this whole thing. That's the hope. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I'm going to link all of the research articles that I referenced here, and then also the original article that I wrote. I hope that you and yours take ownership and responsibility for your own personal health and fitness right now, because it's going to help us all out in the long run. Make the most of yourself. And until next time, kick butt. Take names.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of listeners just like you. If this episode's been helpful to you, please share it with somebody in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. And finally, if you want more Defining Dad Bod, consider joining our online community. We send a lot of free perks and resources your way, and I, Coach Alex, go live every month to talk through our listeners' health and fitness questions to make the practical science of this show applicable to everyday life. Everyone's welcome, and we'd love to have you. For more information about joining the Inner Circle or becoming a supporter of the Defining Dad Bod podcast, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle. That's definingdadbod.com/inner circle.